Today we're going to be beating all the beginner butts, starting with Martin, the easiest one. Let's play e4. I am probably going to be breaking a lot of principles here. I'm going to be explaining the principles that I'm probably going to be breaking. I'm also going to be explaining all the mistakes that all the beginner butts make. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to trick Martin into a scholar's mate. Well, that's not going to work because I developed my bishop, he developed his queen. That's the first mistake that a beginner bot made, bringing out the queen too early. So I'm not going to be able to do the scholar's mate. So let's just play principled chess here. I'm still trying to win as quickly as possible. So you may see me do certain stuff. So for example, because he just played the move pawn to a6, I'm going to play the move knight to d5, which is moving the same piece more than once. And by the way, you are permitted to move the same piece more than once if your opponent moves the same piece more than once. Basically, you are permitted to break principles if your opponent also breaks principles. So let's play knight to d5, attacking the opponent's queen. And then queen to c6 was played. So he saw it. I mean, this is my first time playing Martin, by the way. Like, everybody was saying that he's weak, but he's not blundering his queen. So, oh well. Well, he puts the queen here, attacking my unprotected bishop. So I'm going to play pawn to d3. I move my pawn. I guard my bishop. I think everything is doing fine here. But then he plays pawn to a5. That's another mistake of the beginner bot, where this is just an unnecessary pawn move. Like, pawn a5 is not needed. Taking out the knights and bishops would have made way more sense. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to play the move knight to f3. I develop my knight. I'm also attacking this unprotected pawn. And the guy decided to develop his knight. Not only did he block out his bishop from being developed, he also did not try to guard the pawn. So now I'm able to take the free pawn. The pawn is unprotected, by the way. There's nothing guarding it. So let's take the free pawn, and I'm attacking the queen. So the queen moved over to d6. I'm trying to check to see if I can find any tactical ideas. Not necessarily seeing any, but let's look on the opponent's last move. The queen went to d6. It attacks the unprotected knight, and we want to not lose the knight. So the move that I'm about to play is actually bishop to f4. Why? I develop a piece and I guard my knight. I didn't necessarily break a lot of principles this game. I only moved my knight more than once because he had to do it. So I didn't like willingly do too much wrong. So knight f5 was played. Now, the first thing that I'm seeing is he's putting his knight on a square that I could simply capture. So that's already just a free knight. So let's just take the free knight. I mean, this is a 250, but I'm not expecting anyone in the whole entire world to be 250. But like, if you know how to move the chess pieces, your rating should at least be 300. Like, the queen takes on d5. Again, you take something that is clearly being guarded by another piece. I'm just completely winning here now. Now I take the queen, and now we're going to be going for a checkmate. Now, in this position, okay, I was about to say there's a checkmate in 2, but there's no checkmate in 2. So what I'm looking on is, notice how I'm attacking this f7 pawn 2 times. This is called counting. So he's only guarding it once. So I'm going to play the move bishop takes f7 check. The king has to move to d8. And then my plan was to play bishop to g5 mate, but then I noticed that his bishop is able to block. So before I do this, I'm going to play the move knight to g6, and knight g6 attacks the rook, which he did not try to defend. Bishop to g5 could lead to a checkmate, but he is able to block with the knight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the move queen to e2, and I'm actually threatening a checkmate on e8. Bro, this guy's seeing all the checkmates. It's weird. I mean, he is weak, but he's seeing all the checkmates. Okay, let's go bishop to g5, checking the king. We want to ensure that we have as much pieces attacking the king. He runs away. Let's take the free rook. Knight e5 makes some sense. Trying to capture my bishop, but my bishop is already guarded, so let's castle the king. I thought I was just gonna make a few threats and deliver the checkmate, but I guess that's not the case playing Martin. Let's play knight takes. Bishop to d8 will lead to a checkmate, and he saw it. I think this bot is programmed to not play good chess, but to prevent all the quick checkmates. That's a free bishop, by the way. Let's just take the free bishop. He could block the check. He moves the king instead. This should definitely lead to a checkmate. Queen takes d6. King has to go here. Bishop back to e3. He has to bluff with the pawns, and then I'll take the pawns, and it will be a checkmate. So let's take here. The king had to move. Now the bishop comes in. Notice how the king is not able to step back. He moves this pawn, and this is going to be checkmate in 2 moves. Queen to c7 check. He has to block with the bishop, and because my queen is attacking v6, I'm going to play bishop takes b6, which will be a checkmate. So let's give a check here. The bishop has to block, and that's a checkmate. So I'm going to be playing another beginner bot, punishing all the mistakes that they made. So now we're playing against Wayne, who is also 250. Let's start by playing e4. E5, that's not a mistake. Let's go knight f3. We're attacking the unprotected pawn. Queen to f6 is the first mistake. What this does is it brings out the queen early, basically. Again, remember not to be developing your queen so early. Let's just go knight to c3 here, just developing my knight. And knight e7 was played. So the purpose of this move is actually to prevent the knight from going to d5. Here, I'm just going to continue with my normal development. Let's go bishop c4. We're trying to bring as much pieces out as quickly as possible. And this guy just played queen to f4, which is just a bad move because not only is he moving the queen more than once in the opening, he's putting the queen on the same line as my bishop. So all I need to do now is move my bishop to d4, well, my pawn to d4, and then his queen is going to be under attack. He saw it though and moves the queen out the way. But now I just need to take this pawn, attacking his queen. The queen has to move again. And these are the things that happens when someone decides to develop their queen too early. He is clearly attacking my unprotected bishop though, so I clearly need to do something about this. So I'm going to play the move queen to e2 and protect the bishop. So h6 was played. This is an unnecessary pawn move. It doesn't try to accomplish anything. I'm going to try to finish my development. Let's start by playing bishop to e3. I could simply castle my king on the next move. Queen takes c4. That's a blunder. He clearly just captured a piece that was clearly being guarded by my queen. So now I'm just going to take, and I'm just ahead by what? Queen in this position, and then he moves his king over to d8, trying to guard this pawn, but then he left this pawn unprotected. Now I'm just going to castle my king. If you notice, all I'm doing is I'm following the principles while they are just blundering. A lot of weaker players, if you want to just stop losing your games, you can actually win out the games by doing this. Just do what you know you need to do and just watch your opponent while they make blunders. So again, g5 didn't do anything. He's not trying to get his pieces out. I'm going to play the move knight to b5. I'm currently threatening to take a free pawn on c7, which could possibly lead to a checkmate. So he plays pawn to f5, and there is a checkmate in 2 moves here. Whenever I say things like there's a checkmate or I'm going to win a queen, it's a big enough video. So you can learn as much from these types of videos by just pausing the video and then solve and then continue to play the video. But the mating tool here is just taking on c7 check. The king has to go to e8, then knight d6 is going to be a checkmate. So let's go queen takes pawn. The king then has to move, and that's a checkmate. We're going to be beating all the beginner bots, so let's go to the next one. Now we're playing against Fabian, who is also 250, so it should be the same idea. We just play e4 and then h5. He decided to break a principle on the very first move, which is weird. I'm actually going to start by playing bishop to c4. I'm targeting this weak f2 pawn, and then he played h5. Well, a5. So both of these are bad moves, by the way. You should never be playing moves like this. It doesn't control the center. It doesn't accomplish anything. And I'm actually thinking of just playing queen to f3 here, going for a quick win. Let's see if we can get away with scholar's meat. I mean, he's 250. Yes, I'm breaking principles. It did not work, but I should have something here because he didn't even try to defend f7. Let's say I check, and then the king goes here, and then I check, and then the king goes here. Okay, I mean, we have to take the free pawn. Let's take the free pawn. He's going to try to run with the king. And am I seeing the checkmate? No. Is there a checkmate? Probably. But for now, let's just get as much pieces in the game as possible. So let's get the knight in the game. Queen moves over to e8. We definitely don't want to be trading queens here since we have such a nice attack on the king and then the king has nowhere to go. So, I mean, I could check here, but once he moves the king, I'm forced to move my queen again. So let me just hold my queen all the way back to f3 and then try to attack the opponent's king afterwards. Pawn e6 was played. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't. I'm trying to win these games as quickly as I possibly can, but I notice when I try to go for these quick wins, they see that I'm trying to do and then they do something else. So let me just complete my development. Knight to h6 was played. That is putting the knight on the edge of the board. You definitely don't want to be putting your knights on the edge of the board like that. Let's play pawn to d4. I'm now just putting my pawn in the center of the board. Pawn c6 was played. So I'm seeing a lot of pawn moves, but he's not developing his pieces. Let me just go bishop to f4 here, developing my pieces. I'm probably going to castle my king. And then once that is finished, the attack will be successful. Knight to b4, finally a piece is on my half of the board. Fork is being threatened. So I'm just going to castle my king, which means I prevent the fork and I get my king out the center of the board. This king is in the center of the board and will or should be checkmated. Now, the thing is, I want to do a pawn break so that way I'm opening more lines. Whenever someone's king is in the center of the board and your king is not in the center of the board, try to do as much pawn breaks to open as much lines as possible. So let's play the move pawn to d5 here. And this is just me trying to open as much lines. Rook to h6 was played. You know, that's just gifting me free material. I'm not even going to take the rook just yet. Let's just take on e7 first, checking the king. And then after he reacts to the check, then I may take the rook. So here's what I'm seeing. I'm trying to set up a checkmate on f7, but my bishop is clearly in the way. So I have an idea of, okay, let me just first move my bishop out the way. And then once I move my bishop out the way, then my queen gets to the f7 square. Now, the thing is, if I do take with my bishop, then it may not work because knight takes h6 covers the f7 square. So I'm actually going to take on d6, which means I'm now threatening a checkmate on f7 and f8. And yo, these bots are just programmed to not to play good chess, but to prevent all the checkmates, which is crazy. Okay, I don't want to trade queens. I'm trying to win the game. So let me pull my bishop back to f4, attacking the rook. And then, okay, obviously he did not try to defend it. Now, another thing that I'm seeing is if a knight goes to c7, that could definitely lead to a checkmate. So pawn c5 was played. Let's not take the rook again and play the move knight to b5. Now I'm threatening to play knight c7, which will be a fork. Guy just gave me a free knight, so let's just take the free knight. This is the plan. I'm trying to fork on e7. Bishop takes, okay. Yeah, I'm still gonna go for it. Let's just fork here. That's a rook, that's a bishop. This is just clearly winning. King moves to f7. Now let's take on e6. And he's probably gonna sacrifice his queen here, which he did. So let's just take the queen. And this should now lead to some form of checkmate. Rook takes was played. Let's go rook here. Check the king. The king has to move. Okay, he didn't move the king. He blocks with the knight. But I have a discovered attack on the king. For example, bishop to d6. It checks the king. I'm applying more pressure to his pin knight. He moves the king out the way. And now I'm going to go knight to f4 and attack the rook. It's crazy. Like, I'm actually not able to deliver a quick checkmate against the lower level bots because they are just programmed to stretch out the game. Let's just take the free rook though. This has to lead to a checkmate. This has to lead to a checkmate. He moves the king. Now we're going to go queen f7 just to ensure that his king is cut off. And now once the king is cut off, I do have a checkmate in 2 moves here. It starts with bishop to e5 check. He has to block with the check, and that's checkmate. We're going to be beating the rest of the beginner bots. 3 down. Now we're playing against Juan, who is 400. So let's see how well he's able to play. Let's just play d4 this time around, you know, just switching it a bit. He goes knight to c6. Now I'm going to play knight to f3, just developing normally. Like really at the lower levels like 400, 500, please don't be too fixated on openings. Like opening principles are important, but if you're around 400, 500 levels, and like I always check my comments, and I just want to say this right now. If you're the person who ever leave a comment under someone's page saying, "Hey Akeem, what's the best opening for Dash?" and then you give your ratings, then your mindset is already wrong. And don't ask that question ever again. I'm happy that you're engaging on my post, but those are not the right questions to ask. Don't ask questions about openings, especially if your rating is so low. But let's just keep developing the pieces. I'm not going to try to go for a quick win because I guess they programmed the bot to prevent all the mates, but knight a5 is a mistake. Remember, we do not move the same piece more than once in the opening stage of the game. Let me just continue to develop my pieces. Now I have 3 of my pieces developed. Pawn to b5 is also a mistake because once we move the pawn to b5, my knight is clearly able to take on b5. Like if you want to move from the 400, 500, 600 level, just again, please don't be researching which openings to play and all of that stuff. You're wasting your time, by the way, and maybe you don't know that you're wasting your time, but if your rating is still low and you're still trying to look for openings, then that should be an indication that what you're doing is not working. But anyways, all you need to do is, how well are you able to see where your pieces are covering? How well are you able to see where the opponent's pieces are covering? That's the skill that you should try to develop. Bishop to a6 was played. He's attacking my knight, but already we have a fork in this position. Again, if you're trying to get better at chess, you just need to be able to count and see where your pieces are pointing. For example, I have two pieces pointing towards the c7 square. 1, 2. The opponent only has one piece guarding the c7 square, which is the queen, which means we are about to win some material. So let's just play knight takes c7. That's a check. Once the king didn't even move. The guy gave me the queen. So let's just take the queen. And by the way, now that we're ahead in material, the goal is try to trade as much pieces as we can off the board. It's going to make the game way easier for you. So let's just play e3, and my bishop is now open to start trading. Pawn to g6 was played. Now, instead of just immediately taking the knight, I'm going to play pawn to b3 to attack the opponent's knight. Now, he didn't even move the knight. Yo, this is weird. There's so much flies out here. I'm going to change my shirt. Be right back. So the bishop went back to c8. Let's just take the knight, and bishop to f5 was played. All right, I'm going to go for checkmate here. I think we have to start by taking this pawn, and it allows my bishop to gain access to this diagonal pointing towards the king. Now, f6 was played. I guess the king is trying to run away. Let's just check though. Bishop b5, we develop the bishop, we check the king. The king decided to run away, and now I'm going to simply castle my king. So e6 was played. After e6, because we're trying to open the position as best as we can, we're definitely going to take on e6. Like, if I could get rid of these two pawns, then that would make it even way better. Let's just play e4 here. I want to play d5 and attack the bishop. Rook to e8 was played. Again, all we're doing is developing our pieces, waiting on the blunders, especially if you're at the lower level. There's so many blunders that is going to come. The guy literally just put his rook on e8 that the bishop is clearly guarding. So let's just take the rook. And that's a check. Maybe he's not, he did take it. Now we're going to just roll the pass pawn up the board, attacking bishop. He moves the bishop. Let's continue rolling the pass pawn up the board. He took on f3. We're not going to take back. We're going to roll the pass pawn up the board. And that's a check. So he had to react to the check. Now, before I take the bishop, I want to queen my pawn, but I don't want him to take my queen. So I'm going to play the move queen to d5. This is a check, which means he has to react to the check. Then I'm going to queen. So in this position, I actually have two queens on the board. There should be some checkmating ideas somewhere here. But I think his king is always going to be able to escape to h6. So I'm going to pull my bishop back to h6 so that way his king is not able to escape to h6. He moves the bishop to a3. Now I'm going to check on d7. There's no escaping on h6. He blocks with his bishop. If I take the knight takes check, he moves the king. This will lead to a checkmate, but I think I need more pieces in the attack. So let's play rook to b1, so that way my rook is able to join the attack in the end. So after he took this rook, I'm going to sack the queen with check. The knight has to take, then I check here. The king has to go back, and that's a checkmate. So there's two more 400 level pots to go. Let's play e4 here. Again, let's just develop our pieces, and maybe we could break some rules. e5 was fine. Let's develop, hit the pawn. d6 is a bit fine, but it blocks out this bishop. So we're going to be playing a regular Italian game. And then bishop to e6 was played. Okay, so we could take, let's go queen e2, guarding the bishop. Knight f6 was played. Now we play knight c3. We're just trying to develop as quickly as we can. Pawn c6. Okay, this one is not playing too badly. Let's castle the king. Okay, bishop to g4 pins the knight. I'm gonna simply play pawn to d3 here. We're just trying to get as much pieces developed. Queen c8 really did not do anything. Let's go bishop g5. Every single piece is now developed. My king is also castled. King d7 was definitely not the move. And I guess one of the main aim of this video, especially since it's being targeted to more beginner players, is first you should castle your king, and then you should try to ensure that you open the center to get to the opponent's king. Opening the center basically means pawn break. So I want to play pawn to d4. I'm going to play rook to d1 with the whole idea of playing pawn to e4. And all of these moves that the opponent is playing, it doesn't really do anything. It doesn't accomplish anything. Let's play pawn to d4 here. Just moving the pawn on d4. My rook is on the same line as the king, which means once I take on e5, this pawn is now pinned and it's not able to take my bishop. h5 also didn't do anything. That's just a free knight. Let's just take the knight. And after that, my pawn is going to take this pawn. Well, he is attacking my bishop. The question is, do I even want to move the bishop? Okay, let's move the bishop first, and then afterwards, I'm going to take the pawn and go for a checkmate. Queen moves. Let's take the pawn. Like, I have so many active pieces in this position. He moves the queen again. All of these are bad moves, by the way. Let's take, this is a double check. He has to react to it. He took with the king, and now we're searching for the checkmate. There's definitely a checkmate here. Let's start with the queen. Let's go queen to e8, checking the king, so that way I can infiltrate from the back. He blocks with the knight. Now I'm able to play queen takes rook, attacking the king. King goes to c5, and then my bishop comes in the attack. Now notice all I'm doing is I'm just trying to get as much pieces close to the king and in the attack as possible. Okay, it would be very embarrassing if I miss a checkmate in one. I think if a3, he's going to sack the queen. If I check here, this king goes back. If I check here, the king also goes back. Let's just play a3. Let's get his queen off the board first. Okay, he didn't sack the queen. That's what he played instead. Okay, now it's going to take a bit longer to deliver the checkmate. Let's go knight to d5. I'm just trying to bring as much pieces as close as possible to his king. He moves his king to d6. Now let's take on a7, attacking the king. He blocks with the queen, and now my bishop joins the attack from here. He's going to either block with the pawn. Okay, he blocks with the pawn. Let's just take. This bishop is able to come in, but then my bishop is able to take and check his king. He has to move the king. Oh my, there has to be a checkmate here. d4 a checkmate? Yeah, that's a checkmate, right? Very good. Now we have one more 400 level beginner bot to play. Let's play against Elena. She is 400. It's going to be the same treatment. Let's play e4, waiting for the mistake. e5 was played. We developed the knight, attacked the pawn. We're just waiting for some mistakes. That's not a mistake. Let's go bishop c4. We're playing the regular Italian game. Pawn d6. Not necessarily a mistake, but it blocks out the bishop. And you don't really want to be blocking out your bishops when you're playing. Let me just continue to develop my pieces. Now I have 3 pieces developed. Bishop to g4 was played. And by the way, there's actually a trap that is possible in this line where I could play h3, then sacrifice my knight. But given that I'm playing against Elena, actually, I haven't been breaking a lot of principles in this video, so let's not start now. Let's play h3 and attack the bishop. If the bishop takes the knight, we take with the queen. The bishop did not take the knight. Let's play queen to e2. Same idea. Defending our bishop. Queen to f6 was played. Developing the queen a bit early. Now let's just castle our king. The bishop on our side is the only piece that needs development. Bishop takes was played. Remember, to take is a mistake. So notice after our queen takes back, it helps our queen to get a better position. Now a5 was played, and then I'm going to play the move knight to d5, putting my knight on d5, attacking the opponent's queen. He pulls the queen back, guarding this pawn. Not bad, but again, the main theme for today is once your king is out the center and the opponent's king is in the center, we play pawn to d4, just pawn breaks with the whole idea of opening the center. Knight e7, that's a bad move because now I have 2 pieces pointing towards c7. So now once my knight takes on c7, that's a 4. Okay, I thought it would have sacrificed the queen, but it didn't. Let's take the rook though. Let's take the rook. Maybe the queen won't even take back my knight. It did. Let's take on e5. And now I'm trying to open the position. Once the position is open, it's going to be way easier to get to the king. Let's take on d6. Now, if the king takes, it's over because there's a 4. Knight g6 was played. That's a free pawn, but I want to check here instead. I actually want the king to take this pawn because if the king takes the pawn, then the game is over. But they really programmed the bots not to fall for like easy checkmates. Let's go rook to d1. I want to push my pawn to d7. That would also come the king. Okay, pawn h5. No, pawn d7 check. The king has to move. If the queen takes the pawn, it's over. The king moves out the way. And I want to... Okay, look on this move. Knight to d4. I'm actually threatening to play knight c6. Ooh, this is called a pin, by the way. Like, my knight is actually able to get to the c6 square because the pawn is not able to take it due to the pin. So once the king move, I take the queen, and just like that, we're winning, basically. He moves the king. Now I want to just queen my pawn, but the king is in the way. Let's take the bishop first. Queen to c8 should lead to a checkmate. Yeah, this is checkmating too. Queen to c8 check. The king has to go here. And once I queen my pawn, that's a checkmate. We beat all the beginner bots. Hopefully you learned something. Subscribe for more.